Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, and you're listening to episode number 17 of the Future is Bright podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with Kim Yapchai, former SVP, Chief Environmental, Social, and Governance Officer at Tenneco, and Dennis Garcia, Assistant General Counsel of Microsoft, both in Chicago. So from a legal executive's perspective, we discussed the ongoing layoffs, building psychological safety, and the importance of communication. We then talked about talent and what both Dennis and Kim look for when adding to their legal teams. So stay to the end to hear their advice for in-house attorneys who are looking to move up the ladder and into more challenging roles, and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes and YouTube. So welcome Kim and Dennis to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you both on the show.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be here.
Likewise, Chris. Thank you.
So just so my audience gets some background, please share just a brief bio about yourselves to give them some context.
Sure. So, Chris, my career path is a little unique in that I've been in-house for the entire time, 30 years with multinational public companies in the Fortune 500, and titles like Assistant General Counsel, Chief Compliance Officer, and most recently, Chief ESG Officer. Very exciting stuff.
Very. And Dennis?
Yes. Well, thanks, Chris. Well, Chris, first off, thank you for having me on your podcast today. And also congratulations to your Kansas City Chiefs for winning.
Yeah. Very exciting times. Thank you.
Absolutely. So my name is Dennis Garcia. I'm an Assistant General Counsel for Microsoft. I'm based in the Chicago area. I provide primary legal support to our Microsoft North America Marketing and Operations and Partner Solutions teams. I've been at Microsoft now for a little bit over 20 years. Like Kim, I've also been in-house throughout my entire career. So I started my career many years ago working at IBM, then moved to Accenture's legal department, and now at Microsoft.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So just so my audience, as a reminder, this episode is going to be focused on talent and team. And again, I'm grateful for Kim and Dennis's availability. They're both very busy, have a lot going on, and they have this huge breadth of experience working with teams and leading and having their own journeys. And so today I want to jump into initially, let's talk about current trends. 2023, last year too, but 2023, these announcements of layoffs and RIFs, as my wife has coached me through, reductions in force. I'd love to hear from you both. What are you seeing? And, how is this affecting your lives or your team's lives through these changes?
There's definitely a lot of churn going on, Chris. It seems like it really doesn't matter which industry or which region right now. There's just a lot of change. And it almost feels like it's anticipatory. It's not that companies, that we're in a recession completely or that companies are so suffering with their financials, but they're anticipating things and trying to get ahead of it.
Yes, no, there's been a lot of change, no doubt. A lot of folks like to say change is the only constant. 6 months ago, it was a very different environment, right? And so we've been seeing a lot of folks being negatively impacted, unfortunately, across the industries, especially the information technology industry. But from my perspective, it's a very fluid environment. Hopefully, the business uncertainty will be limited. We've seen some positive signs over the past few weeks that perhaps inflation is getting under control. And I read a New York Times article earlier this week about how companies are also continuing to invest in technology and spending money. So I think there's some good signs in the economic climate.
So with these reductions in force, what's happening to your lives and happening to your teams because of it?
Well, I would just say that there is no doubt that when these times happen, there's increased anxiety, right, which folks may feel. And one thing which I try to do, I know which our management team tries to do, is really check in with our teammates and our folks, see how they're doing, to remind them to invest in their wellness. I think there's probably more opportunities for us as lawyers and legal professionals to engage in more prioritization of their work. thinking about how they're allocating resources. And the way I look at this is really an opportunity to serve our clients. During tougher times, our clients need us more than ever. So as lawyers and legal professionals, we really need to show up and help them problem solve issues.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know for our team, we like to sort of adopt a theme for the year. And for this year, we adopted the theme, work smarter, not harder. Right? Knowing that, budget cuts are probably coming, right? And there's all this change going on. So how can we make sure we remain focused on the right things and showcase the value that we provide? So it's been working really well so far.
So both on those themes of technology, work harder, not smarter, I'd love to bring up the buzzword this past couple of weeks, which is the AI chat GPT. Dennis, you're at Microsoft. Everyone else is starting to announce it with Google's Bard, I think it's called. And there's a couple ones. China's kind of trying to rise to the occasion. I'd love to get your personal opinions and thoughts around how this is going to affect people, even or your departments.
Sure. I'll share just a few thoughts. In many respects, maybe 2023 so far, at least the first 6 weeks have been the year of artificial intelligence, right? And I think it's an exciting time because we're seeing some newer developments in the AI space. Of course, OpenAI, which Microsoft has invested in heavily, put together the chat GPT technology. I would encourage folks to do a test drive of chat GPT and check it out because it's really an incredible technology. Now, I think there's lots of opportunities for legal departments and law firms to think about deploying chat GPT-like functionality within their companies and firms to help address some of the routine and repetitive questions that many of us as lawyers and legal professionals face every day. So, but as we think about artificial intelligence, there's no doubt that there's other issues we need to keep top of mind, such as ethics and biases and responsibilities. But I think it really creates an opportunity for all of us as lawyers and legal professionals.
I think what you said was key, Dennis, in that these are technology solutions that help get rid of the mundane and the routine so that as lawyers, we can focus on what the more exciting projects are, the more strategic ones. So it just, again, it's a great way of showcasing working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. And, I've spoken to a fair amount of lawyers and younger law students, younger legal professionals and lawyers. And I tell them, do not fear artificial intelligence, right? Use AI as a tool to better serve your clients. Right. I personally don't think it's going to be replacing lawyers or legal professionals anytime soon. But if it could help your jobs, if it can help, to your point, free up time to do more mission critical work, why not? Right. So embrace artificial intelligence. I think you also need to be thoughtful and smart as to which artificial intelligence solution provider you choose. You want to work with a provider that you can truly trust, especially if they're having lots of access to your data.
Let's touch on a couple key things that are what I hear top of mind for management of legal departments and their teams. One of them being creating psychological safety for your team and how people are just struggling right now. I'd love to hear from either one of you about either things that have been introduced to you in your journey or things that you've used to build that within your team.
Yeah, we use psychological safety as a term a lot, especially in the ethics and compliance arena. So not just with the team, but with employees and team members as a whole. If people don't feel safe enough to speak up and be heard, the company loses out, right? You lose out on new ideas, on diversity of thought, and people letting you know when things are going wrong. So it's something that really, to me, has to be part of your culture if you want to establish it. And you can certainly start with just your own direct team if it doesn't exist right now. But Dennis, what do you think?
No, absolutely. And a few years ago, our president and vice chair, Brad Smith, required all of the leaders in the Microsoft legal department to read a book written by Amy Edmondson, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, called The Fearless Organization. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And she talks about how to earn trust and develop psychological safety with your teams. And it's from my perspective of what I learned from Professor Edmondson, and this notion that trust takes time. You know, you can't claim trust. You have to earn trust over a period of time. It's important to be transparent with your teammates. You need to check in with them, asking them, how do you support them? You know, thanking them for their work. And it takes time to build that psychological safety. But I think it's a more important area than ever before in the modern workplace.
Yeah, and it's about having their back when things go wrong too, right? And then to your point, Dennis, it takes a long time to earn the trust. It takes only a moment to lose it.
Absolutely.
I'd love for you, if you can, if we could just spend a couple more minutes on this, is what does it mean to be transparent with someone? What does that really mean?
Well, I mean, you know, in the workplace, it's interesting. You know, we see a lot of workplace sort of corporate speak, if you will. My own personal style is I'm not the biggest corporate speak person in the world. I like to try to speak in what I speak to my teammates and providing them real talk, real perspective on, you know, issues and matters. And I think part of it is just trying to be as open and honest as you can with them, right? I mean, sure, as a leader in a company, you are part of management. You got to be thoughtful in what you're saying, of course. But I think people really crave more than ever before leaders who are open and frank and who will provide open feedback and constructive feedback when needed to really invest in their careers. I know as an employee, I want my manager and my leadership team to be open and honest with me. If they have something which they need to share with me, please let me know, right? I want to improve. And so I just think nowadays, more than ever, we value leaders who are just so authentic and down to earth and approachable. I find it refreshing when you work with folks like that.
I agree with that, Chris. It's important to tell your team and like sort of be upfront about it. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you everything I can, but there are some things that I can't, right? So that they understand there's boundaries. Like if there's a really super secret M&A deal going on, I can't share that. On the flip side of that, though, I remember I had a manager when I was younger in my career who essentially would test people. He would say, I'm going to share this with you because I'm going to trust you. Right? And so he would share like a little bit maybe that he shouldn't share. But I thought of it as investing in someone, right? You're testing the relationship. You're investing in it. And you're seeing, is the trust holding? So that is an easy way to say, look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this little bit, you know, as a way of trying to develop trust with someone.
Super helpful, and I appreciate that. Let's it's interesting because we're talking about psychological safety, and a lot of it's just communication. There's this challenge I find, and COVID has brought this to the surface in spades, of the need to communicate with people and to remain in touch. So with management and with teams, I'd love to hear how you're trying to communicate, because everything's decentralized, or there's, you know, remote team members, maybe not seeing everyone as often. And so how is that occurring in a very practical sense for you and your teams?
Well, from my experience, you really need to be checking in with your teams, right? I mean, you don't want to, of course, micromanage them, but I think having periodic one-on-ones with your direct reports or other folks on your team, having maybe monthly or maybe bi-monthly wide team meetings, right, where you're talking about various different topics. You're getting some of their thoughts and opinions. You want to make those discussions as inclusive as possible, maybe even invite certain guest speakers. Being able to maybe just connect informally through instant messaging, right? If you're not co-located with them. I mean, there's so many ways of connecting nowadays. I also think, when we're connecting, it's not necessarily the case that you need to have your video on when you're connecting with your teammates, right? I mean, being on video can be a little exhausting sometimes, right? And so providing them with the choice as to whether or not they want to have the video on or off, right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Dennis. And I also like to watch during a meeting, right? And if I'm not hearing from particular people or I'm noticing sort of a difference, like they're really talkative and now they're quiet or vice versa, then that's a person that I might want to check in with afterwards or try to engage in a different way to make sure that they're okay and that they're focused. Because it is harder when you don't see people face to face in the office. You have to find other ways to connect.
The other thing I would say too, is in my experience is if you're having, of course, team meetings or even one-on-ones with your manager or direct reports, is asking for an agenda or providing an agenda in advance so that you're really focused and using your time in a valuable, high-impact way, right? And you can sort of shape the discussion and see how your leader or your folks can contribute and sort of help support you.
Yeah, and a simple question that you can use is just at the end of the meeting to say, what is it that I can do to help you? What more do you need from me, or what different do you need from me? And sometimes that opens up something that you didn't even expect.
Excellent. So let's pivot to talent. And so talent is very fierce right now, trying to keep your team, trying to secure the kind of people that you want. Obviously, diversity is even more fierce as we're trying to find folks. I'd love for you to share what you're doing to. So the first question is, are you actively recruiting? Do you recruit? And where do you find recruits? Where do you find team members that you want to consider in your pipeline of talent eventually? And what do you look for?
Well, I would just say from my perspective, my team is not actively recruiting any talent. There'll be hopefully a point in time where that will evolve and change. In terms of where myself and my teammates have found great talent in the past, I mean, number one, we've been aided by having terrific leaders in our human resources and go to marketing and GTA talent acquisition teams, who've been so helpful to us in identifying top talent and securing them, right? So we've been helped by just great professionals who have assisted us through the years. But we've also taken matters in our own hands. A number of my teammates and I are very active on social media, especially LinkedIn. We've attended legal industry events and meetings, and that's been a great way to network and connect with people and to look for a pipeline of terrific talent. So, using our internal terrific HR team as well as my teammates who network so well and have such a wide Rolodex of lawyers and legal professionals who they can reach out to has been very helpful.
Yeah, my team's not recruiting actively right now either, but I'd say we always have our eyes out for top talent, right? If as Dennis said, whether you're at a conference or you're meeting somebody else, you sort of make a mental note, okay, next time I have an opening. But at the same time, we really love to develop from within. I look for people, again, especially in the compliance and legal ops area, it really can come from anywhere in the organization. They don't have to be lawyers to do those positions. So I'm always looking for who's a up and comer, right, rising star, and then this might be a really great opportunity for them to get experience in these other topics. But I'd like to touch sort of just beyond in terms of recruiting. ESG is turning out to be really important to the Gen Z and millennials. The research is really surprising. And what's interesting is it's not certain topics, right? Oh, it's just diversity or just environmental or things like that. I think it really goes back to the trust and transparency that you mentioned before, Chris, right? The willingness for the corporations to say, okay, we're here, and here's things that we're trying to do to make ourselves better, right? Whatever makes sense for that industry and that company specifically. And it was really surprising to me over the past couple of years, the amount of new hires who said, oh my gosh, your team wrote that report. It was amazing. I read it before I joined the company. So, that transparency, that trust, I think is really important to people when you're recruiting.
And, one thing we talk a lot about at Microsoft is a notion of how do we continue to re-recruit our existing talent, right? And so I know myself and many of my teammates who've been at Microsoft for a long period of time, we take very seriously as to how do we mentor and coach our teammates, especially those who may be more junior in nature. The company has been really good to us, and we want to give back and sort of creating this sort of next generation of outstanding Microsoft lawyers and legal professionals. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to help them grow and stretch. And we want to hear from them, right? What are you excited about? How can we put you in a position of success?
Yeah, mentoring is really a two-way street, right? They give as much as they get, frankly.
So I would love to hear from you too, if you're attending an event or for some reason you come across somebody, whether it's for your company or just like, oh, that person's impressive or something that catches your attention. What are some of the qualities or what have they done that may make you curious?
I think confidence and leadership are, two things that really strike me. Number one, to go and speak at a conference, you want to have yourself be polished and prepared. And unfortunately, those who are not, it shows quite easily. And those who really know their stuff, they can handle the questions when the Q&A comes at them. They really distilled their message as well, so that if they're communicating to executives, it's going to be understood.
That's excellent.
I agree. I'm sorry. I totally agree with that. And it's sort of interesting because in a few weeks, I'm going to be attending the Hispanic National Bar Association Corporate Council Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm excited to be a representative of the Microsoft legal department there. And I'm excited because it's an opportunity for us to hopefully meet potential talent, right? And so what I'm really impressed by when I meet folks is their hunger, if you will, their enthusiasm, if they're excited about being a lawyer, what do they know about Microsoft and the direction which we're heading into? To Kim's point, to the effect that somebody can succinctly talk about what they bring to the equation, their value add, their potential impact. I think that's always great to hear.
Excellent. Let's pivot. I would love to hear from both of you your advice for people who are let go unexpectedly as a surprise, or maybe some who probably weren't surprised, but would still love to hear your advice.
Yeah, so I'll start off with that one. So I am in transition myself, Chris. We did a deal where we took our company private, and as is typical with private equity, they replaced the management team. For me, it was expected, so not quite as surprising. But it's part of the journey. I think, number one, it's important for people to realize these things happen in life, and you don't always have control over it. And it doesn't change who you are. Just because you're not working for that company anymore, you're still just as fabulous as you were before. and it's just, I think staying positive, being excited about this next chapter, because there are wonderful things out there, and, you just don't know where it may lead next.
Yeah. The psychology is so critical around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say, a few thoughts, and I'll use a quote from one of my favorite movies, The Godfather. it's business, not personal, right? And I think we've been seeing a lot of these rifts where unfortunately people have been laid off, and it's done for business and financial related reasons, maybe not totally personally. So I think it's important to recognize that. I think you also need to be hyper focused on your wellness and to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I think you also need to think before something like this can happen, and it's probably a matter of time before everybody in their legal career, this is going to happen to them probably at some point in time. So I think to the extent that you can constantly think about networking and meeting newer people, right? Being active on social media, on LinkedIn. But I think you need to be very active in doing those things beforehand.
Yeah, build the network in your brand before you need it, 100%. And for me, the networking right now, it's actually fun. I'm just catching up with old friends, right? Like, hey, I'm going to be in town. Let's have lunch. I told my husband I'm going to have to go on a diet because I'm having lunches and dinners right now. But I'm having fun and enjoying it. And I think that's the other part of it is embrace it. 30-year career, I've not had a single break. And this is the first time. So I get to do some fun things like travel that I haven't had time for, and go on vacation and really be on vacation. So, take advantage of whatever it might be.
Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you're taking some time, Kim. So with this next topic I'd love to get into is I want to hear advice from both of you around, say, this notion of you're in a corporate legal department and you're saying, what's next for me? How do I, because most corporate legal departments are flat. There's usually not a lot of movement unless it's a high growth organization. We're coming off of a tremendous decade of growth. And you have these people saying, how do I move up? How do I grow? How do I manage my career and dive into professional development? What advice do you give to corporate legal department attorneys of 1 year to 30 years as they continue to ask that question?
Well, I would say first that you always want to be the captain of your career, right? And so you want to manage it. Otherwise, someone else will manage it for you. And then it may go in the direction which you don't want to, go in. So you have to certainly take ownership and accountability for that. So I think, learning from teammates who've maybe been successful in different roles in their careers. I think willing to raise your hand and to volunteer for stretch projects, letting your manager or your manager's manager know that you're open to doing different things. I think also this notion of building relationships, sponsor relationships, ideally, with people of power and influence in your legal department and in your company. Now, that takes a while to cultivate those relationships, but you need to think about how do you build relationships with people and earn their trust, and then they'll say, well, let's consider Dennis or Kim for that next assignment, for that next opportunity. And I think that the final thing I'll say just very quickly is to Kim's point earlier, ESG, a very growing and hot area. Think about also pivoting and learning new skills which are going to be in demand. Privacy, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree, Dennis. And to your point on ESG, when I was hired at Tenneco, it was not for the ESG role. The ESG role didn't even exist. But because I went and had a conversation with the CEO and asked him about it, he asked me to lead it. And then it led to my promotion to the executive leadership team. That was never even contemplated originally. And so I think it's important when you reach out to people and you try to build those relationships, it's not all about how can they help you. It's how can you help them? How can you help solve a problem? How can you help fill a void, right? Whatever it might be, that's how you form the relationships. And then the other mistake I think people make is not being willing to invest in themselves. I'll hear somebody, oh, I really want to go to this conference, but the company won't pay for it for me, and I need it to do my job. Well, then pay for it yourself, right? Within reason, obviously, but find a way to make it work. be a speaker so that your registration fee gets waived, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. And just because your company's not willing to make the investment, well, then you should. Because if you're not willing to do it, why should the company, right?
It's really true.
So you have to, if it's really something that is needed to get to the goal that you want to be, do that, or hire the executive coach or whatever it might be. But to Dennis's point is you've got to drive the bus, not ask someone else to drive it and wait for them. You can't just keep your head down and do good work is not enough.
Yeah, I just one quick key point on that to drill down on that. My dad used to tell me a long time ago, he said, Dennis, you need to toot your own horn. And the reality is, while you shouldn't be a shameless self-promoter, I think you need to figure out opportunities to promote yourself and the impact, not necessarily the activities, but the impact that you're driving for your company and for your legal department. You need to let your manager know about that. You need to let your skip level know about that. You can't be shy in really promoting yourself, because sometimes if you don't do that, you can't rely on others to do so.
So this question I haven't asked either of you before, but I'm going to throw it out. What has been for each of you the single greatest thing that if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be where you are today in your career? What's been that part of your journey that's looking back and saying, wow, so grateful, or I developed this, or this has been part of something I bring to the table? What's been that thing?
Yeah, I'll start off with a supportive family.
Yeah.
It takes a village to do these sort of jobs. It is not easy, especially when you're working for a global company. It's at all hours of the day and night.
Yeah.
And really having that supportive structure, not just family, but friends around you, makes it easier, especially during the darkest times. But the other thing I'll throw out there is emotional intelligence. I don't even remember hearing about that in the beginning of my career. And it wasn't until I went through a leadership course later on and they told me, mine was off the charts. And I'm like, well, yeah, aren't all the high performance people here like that? That's just what everyone has, because that's why we're here. And they said no.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized, oh my gosh, this is why I see things that other people don't, like what's happening in a meeting or in a relationship or how to navigate a hurdle or something like that. So I would encourage people to pay attention to that and try to develop it, because it can really help you to get to solutions faster.
Thank you.
And from my perspective, I would say two things. Number one, my wife, Simona, she's been my biggest supporter over the years, and there are times where I'll vent to her about certain issues and she'll keep me well grounded. She constantly provides me with great advice, right? And I'm just so lucky to have her in my life. And I think the second thing, I've been a Microsoft lawyer for 20 years. I'm biased on this, but I think it's the greatest legal department on the planet. And I've been able to work with such great lawyers and legal professionals in my time. And, they've made me a better lawyer, a better legal leader, and a better person. And I just feel blessed that I've had the opportunity to work with them for 20 years and be able to learn from them.
So Kim and Dennis, how can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest for me right now.
Okay.
Yeah, ditto. I would say LinkedIn. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn.
Very good. So Kim and Dennis, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very fun.